Greetings. My name is Kate Rademacher, and we're here with Writing for Your Life and Compassionate Christianity. I'm excited and delighted to invite Lauren Cibene. Lauren is a brand new writer. This is her first book that's been published and just came out last week. The title is Tiger in a Lifeboat: Discovering India, Deconstructing Faith, and Deciding to Trust Again. Um, and Lauren, I'm really looking forward to hearing you talk about your book. And I know that it's a story that's kind of part memoir, part, travel log, perhaps you might describe, sort of an exploration of losing faith, finding faith, all the things. So really looking forward to hearing about your book. Can you just start before we talk, in depth about your book, Tiger in a Lifeboat? Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from and sort of where you are in your journey that led you to this point? So again, welcome and thanks for being
Yes.
here.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm so happy and excited to talk about this. So I am Lauren. I am located just north of Atlanta, close to where the Appalachian Mountains start. And I grew up very cozy, sheltered Christian church girl. I was homeschooled by my parents in a very evangelical, typical white American environment. All the way through my educational career, I graduated and went to a Christian college. So my whole life, I married the son of a missionary. My whole life was set up to be like this titan of faith. And when I was in my like late 20s, I experienced a traumatic event. And in that, a lot of things shattered in my life, and my faith was one of them. So that's kind of where my book actually starts, which is a good segue. So my book starts with me kind of in the aftermath of this trauma and trying to realize, where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And yeah, so let's get into your book. Tell us about sort of what prompted you to write it and kind of what it's all about, maybe just at a high level.
Yeah, sure. I've been a writer all my life. I love writing. It's a part of like how I process life events and things. So I was journaling through this very rough kind of deconstruction phase where I was recovering from trauma and I was deconstructing faith, and so I was writing through that. And incidentally, a lot of that happened while I was traveling through India. So it's the backdrop is India, well, for a lot of it. So initially, I was just writing just for myself, as part of my healing process. And then a couple years down the road, a year or two down the road, I realized that I was not alone. I was part of this cohort of people whose specifics, of course, were very different and drastically, different from each other's. But we were all kind of sifting through the religion that we had inherited, and there's a great deal of shame associated with that. That was what I took from everyone that I spoke to. They felt very much like that I'm broken. This is a failing on my part, and I believe that shame can't exist when people share a commonality around this thing. Like if there's shame about something and someone says, "Oh no, me too. I've actually been struggling with that too." Shame just goes away. So that was what pushed me to take my writing from just being a private, personal thing and saying, okay, if there's something here for someone that can help take away the shame and make them feel less alone, there's something valuable that I need to chase there.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you putting that in context of sort of the bigger cultural moment we're in of so many people deconstructing their faith. And I think, part of what I really appreciate your book is that you're sort of, looking towards the future and sort of how to put things back together in perhaps a new and more meaningful way.
Mhm.
So perhaps maybe you mentioned India. Can you just tell us a little bit about sort of the premise of your book and kind of what happens in the early parts of the book as you get going with the narrative?
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, like I mentioned, I was kind of in this trauma season. I was diagnosed with PTSD and had PTSD related anxiety and depression. So I was in this fog. And interestingly enough, at that very moment, my husband said, "Oh, I just found these airline tickets. These tickets to India are like 75% off, and there's this tour on sale. And oh my gosh, like this is all coming into place. Like, can we do this? Could we go to India?" And I'd been working with a therapist, and we'd been working on, trying to pull myself out of that fog. And she said it might need to happen before you feel like you're fully ready for this to happen. So for the timing for her to have said something like that and my husband to have said, we've got this opportunity, it was just the perfect storm for me to say, yes, let's do this. And I think I was playing chicken with the universe a little bit. I think that I wasn't fully expecting for the trip to happen. But like our tickets got booked and the trip got planned and everything just started falling into place. And I ended up going to India.
So tell us what happens next. I mean, I've read most of the books, so I know, but like just to give us a little sort of sneak peek of what happens when you get to India.
Okay, so we do get to India, and it's 2 weeks initially that we're there, and it's a very transformative trip. And there's no place like India and on Earth. And I know you mentioned you'd been there. So did you have that experience as well?
Yeah, and I know you also went to Nepal, and I really loved Nepal and loved India. So yeah, it's an incredible part of the world. Very, very vibrant and complicated and all the things. But yeah.
Yes. Yes, totally. That was my experience too, and it was just exactly what I needed. It was healing, but it was abrasive. It was loving, but it was also challenging. Like there was all of this like evolution inertia that I experienced being there. And towards the end of the first trip, and like this whole time, the first like third of the book is me talking about all of my grievances with the American church and or this organized Christianity, this thing that I just have a complicated relationship with. And then towards the end of the trip in India, we meet somebody with a ministry who is actively working in India, and they offer me a job. And so I'm faced with this very real choice of like, these are all of the things that bother me about being in this world of ministry. And these are things that are, like abrasive to my soul and my healing process. But I have this opportunity. What do I do with that?
Well, and it's really, I mean, tell me if you agree with this characterization, but you're really weaving together sort of the travel story with kind of your journey of healing and growth and sort of insights about that. So I think you do sort of a nice back and forth. Do you feel like that's a fair way of describing it?
Oh, yes, thank you. That's very complimentary as well. But yeah, I did try to kind of juxtapose this external journey with an internal journey that was happening at the same time.
Yeah, great. Well, and how I know, so we're getting you, we talk to authors at different phases in their publication journey. So I know you just published the book last week. It's
Yes.
May 2025 right now. And so congratulations. And so how does it feel to have the book out in the world and sort of have there been any surprises or, what do you hope that the book will accomplish? Kind of
Mm.
related to that point we made earlier, which so many people are sort of going through this deconstruction of faith. Do you feel like your book sort of speaks to a bigger um, sort of bigger patterns that you see in our national conversation or your local community? I know that's a hard question to answer, like sort of what do you hope your book achieves, but I mean, where do you sort of see this as part of that ongoing process that I think so many people are in, as you named?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I have to be self-aware and state that this is a small story. Like especially in the world of memoir, like you have to be exceedingly tragic or you have to be a celebrity in order to like have this like super successful memoir. Mine, in light of all that, is a very small story. But I so believe that small stories are still very significant. So, and my mom actually, she asked me a very similar question prior to publishing when I first decided like I was going to put this out there. And she was like, "Well, what's your goal here? What's the aim?" And the poem by the Persian poet, oh my gosh, his name just escaped me. But this poem came to mind. It's very short. He says, the small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. And that was what I hoped. I hoped that this was just a single key that I could drop, that for someone out there, it would open the door. It would help them feel like I'm not alone, I'm not crazy, I'm not broken. This is just this is what my becoming feels like, or in part maybe. That was my great hope. And I do feel like, especially in the crowd that is deconstructing, but they can't seem to get over the red letters. They can't seem to get over the person of Jesus. That crowd, I think, especially will resonate. And I fully believe that deconstruction, is not about an end goal. It's not about like us all arriving at the same place. This is very much a personalized process. For me, I couldn't get over the red letters. And so there is still some semblance of like coming back to, or like a reclaiming, reconstruction in my story.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I love the words becoming and reclaiming, and the language you're using is really evocative. So I appreciate that. Well, tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about the title. I know that the title is kind of an homage to the book Life of Pi. And so maybe tell us about that. And also, you kept coming back to this image of being the tigress.
Mhm.
Or being called to maybe show up as the tigress. So can you just say a little bit about the title and kind of how that image runs through the narrative?
Yes, yes, it is an homage to Life of Pi. I am a student of story. That's like my first language. And so in my own trauma recovery, I held very tightly to the story of Life of Pi, which, if you haven't read it, it's definitely worth the time. Not like the movie, like this so much richer than the movie. But one of the things that people kind of debate about the book Life of Pi is whether there was an actual tiger in the story. And this is a little bit of a spoiler, but the book's been around, so hopefully I'm not wrecking it for anybody. But in the end, Pi has a conversation with some insurance adjusters, and they don't believe his story. They don't believe that he survived in a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger. And so it's kind of debated, like maybe Pi was manifesting a tiger, because that's what he needed to survive at that moment. And into this tiger, he poured his ferocity and his courage and like his higher self. And he cared for that while he was at sea. And so for me, in my own story, I was just like fracking in my soul, just pulling up anything I could, trying to find like what is where's my tigress? Where's my stronger self, my courageous self? So it was helpful to kind of like bifurcate myself into like this like broken, kind of anxious, semi-agoraphobic kind of mess, and the person that I want to be, which is tiger stripes and fierce and courage.
I love that. I like the image also of you talking about your fracking of your soul. I think you use that in the book, and I think that's a really I don't know, that just spoke to me. So thank you.
Hmm.
Well, I know we've been talking a little bit about the publication journey. We touched on it briefly, but as you know, a lot of our listeners are spiritual writers and are always curious about sort of the writing process and the publication process. So my question to you is like, were there any surprises or major lessons learned or kind of advice you would have to emerging writers or, those who are interested in publication? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, one of the things that I wrestled with was the fact that, publishing a book takes a very long time. And so the person that I was as I was finishing drafting is so much different than the person I was when I, went to my launch party and I finally had it published. So I think understanding and caring for your own soul as you're in this creative process, that was something that I learned, that I had to learn just by necessity, very quickly. And so I had to be okay with the fact that like the Lauren that existed in India is not the same Lauren that existed in drafting, is not the same Lauren that existed in publishing, is not the same Lauren that's in this interview. So there's all these beautiful variations of yourself. And allowing each of them to show up was ultimately, I think, helped support the piece, because the person that I was while I was in India, she deserves to have a moment to say what she was feeling and thinking. And I hope that that shows up on the page, even if the Lauren now may have made choices differently, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think that really resonates with me as a writer. I've published 3 books and I feel like they each represented a season. And now people are going
Mm,
back and reading them, for a book from 7 years ago. And it's like, wow, I'm in a really different place now. But I'm just having to trust. And someone gave me the same advice recently, like trust that the book from that season can be a gift to others. And it doesn't,
Yeah,
you're obviously not a static person as an author. So
totally.
that totally resonates. Well, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about you have a chapter that I just wanted to ask you more about because I thought it was really sort of compelling and dramatic. But you have when you returned to India, as an employee, not just as a tourist, you have some contact with folks who have leprosy. And you talk, some about kind of the medical reality of leprosy, that it's a curable illness, and but you're not there as a doctor.
Hmm.
You're there in a different role. So can you just tell us a little bit, kind of give it, drop us into the scene, tell us a
Mm.
little bit about that situation, again, just to give us a taste of your book. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so this was a significantly difficult part of the story for me. The situation in India is tricky. The government says that leprosy has been eradicated, and that's just simply not true. India is the place that has the most new diagnosis of leprosy worldwide, I believe, at least the last time I checked. So it's yeah, it's frustrating because it's completely curable. Um, the trick about leprosy is that you have to catch it early because what it is it's nerve damage. It's an inability to feel essentially, and so when people cut themselves on their fingers or their toes, they don't feel the pain that happens, and so it gets infected, and the tissue can decay, and that's how you have like loss of fingers, loss of nose, your cartilage, oftentimes your ears. So it's a horribly disfiguring disease, and it's loaded with stigma in India and here as well. I mean, there's still people I talk to that think that leprosy is spread through touch, and that's just misinformation. That's just not true. So it's this it's this big thing, and for me being on the ground and holding hands and touching people and being in the same space with them and talking with them, it just, for me in that moment, it felt enormous. It felt like the suffering was inevitable and that there was nothing I could do about it. And for me, I don't know, this might be relevant for people now. Like when you open your phone, it feels like you're in surgery without anesthesia, like it's just like the suffering is overwhelming. And for me in that moment, in the book I write about it, there's a moment where I just kind of succumb to that. And I shut myself off and I say, I can't change any of this. I can't do anything about this. So I'm just going to have to wall myself up, which is ironic because leprosy is a numbness, and I was numbing intentionally myself to not be impacted by the suffering that I saw. But of course, that's never the answer. Like when we get overwhelmed by all that we can't do, it becomes very easy to lose track of the things that we can do. And so in the story, there's a beautiful moment where women that do not speak the same language as me, who have a vastly different life experience, who are themselves suffering from this disease, they in their own beautiful way kind of pull me back in and kind of pull me out of that numbness, that fog.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate your summary and I work my career, prior to this was in global health, and so this
Oh
is a really
wow.
hard and scary time for global health, given the dramatic funding cuts within the U.S.
Oh.
And yeah, so I appreciate you talking openly and honestly about this issue. Both in your book and now in this interview. So thank you.
Mm.
Well, maybe just like one more big picture question about your book, and then we can talk about sort of how we can order a copy if we want and where we can find you. But again, the sort of through line of your book is healing.
Hmm.
Healing from your own kind of trauma and sort of what happened prior to you going to India, and again, sort of these sort of bigger themes of healing. And just wondering if you have any sort of, what would you say are the takeaways from your book about healing, kind of what the steps are, what is required of us as we try to seek healing. And again, I know this is a huge question, and so I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but just um, kind of what are your big high level takeaways about a healing journey? Thanks.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, this is a good question. And I always, other people have asked me this too, and I always try to approach it with as much like caution as possible, just because everyone's story is so different. The through line or the things that you'll notice, like in my story, this was right for me at this, at all of these junctions in my story, and that was it was a pushing and a motivating to do something different, to be scared, to get out of my comfort zone. And that is not always helpful in a healing journey. Sometimes that can actually be quite detrimental. So I do want to say that up front. But for me, that pursuit of my more courageous, more healed, that tigress person that I wanted to be, it always required me to do something scary. It always required me to say yes in places where I would have much rather had said no. And so for me, and hope, use discretion and get a good therapist and have safe people that you can bounce this off of, to make sure that you're not rushing your healing. I definitely don't want to push that on people, but if you feel like, okay, I need to get out of this loop, I need to do something, my best advice is just do it scared. Go find something that freaks you out, something that takes you way outside your comfort zone, and I think that you'll be surprised in the ways that you show up.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That's really good advice, I think. Well, so tell us, maybe in closing, kind of where we can find your work if we want to stay in touch with you, if your website or on social media. And I'm assuming kind of your book is available sort of wherever books are sold. But sort of, if there's anything else you want to say about accessing you or your work, and then just kind of any final thoughts you have, anything we didn't cover that you want to address. So thanks again.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yes. You can find my book. It is everywhere basically books are sold. It's called Tiger in a Lifeboat. You can find it if you search my name, Lauren Cibene. LaurenCibene.com is my website. I also have a Substack, which is kind of my favorite place on the internet. It's laurencibene.substack.com. And I have just a really great group of people over there. We talk about this kind of stuff all the time. We talk about, story and writing and deconstruction and what reconstruction might look like. It's the kindest group of people that you're likely to find on the internet. So I would love to, if any listeners want to join us over there, I would love to have you.
Great. And is your Substack, can you give us the title or is the best way to find it through your website?
Yeah, you can find it through my website. You can also go to laurencibene.substack.com. The
Okay.
title of it, which is not in the URL, but the
Mhm.
title of it is The Rest of Us. So it's kind of a place for people who are like on the edge of the inside.
Great. Well, Lauren, again, congratulations. I know this is your debut book and it's beautiful, beautifully written, and really just very compelling and fun. I mean, it's like a fun travel story too, on top of sort of your spiritual memoir of losing faith, going through trauma and healing and recovering. So congratulations on its publication, and just really looking forward to seeing perhaps what comes next, future projects as well.
Oh my gosh, Kate, thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Yeah, well, great. Well, let's keep in touch and let us know how it goes.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.